I'm going to talk about handling Azure SQL auditing with ease, or as much ease as you possibly can. So there's some gotchas and stuff. So I'll walk through all that with you. And just so you know, right now I can't see the chat. So if you have any questions, just feel free to chime in whenever you want. You can interrupt me as I go, and that's fine. Or I'll look at the chat periodically too. I might take a break and look at the chat. So anyway, just let me know if you have questions. Feel free to interrupt. So about me, I'm Josephine Bush, and I've been a DBA for a while now. And I have written a book, SQL Database Programming. I'm actually in progress on an auditing book now, a database auditing book with A-Press. So that's going to come out, I think, this summer. So I'm still writing that now. So it'll be a nice overview of all the different things. Like it'll include this stuff. It'll also do SQL Server, all kinds, some AWS stuff as well. So it gives a nice broad coverage of SQL Server auditing in general. So I'm on Twitter at Hello SQL Kitty, and I blog at SQL Kitty, well, intermittently now because I'm writing this other thing, so I don't really have a lot of time to blog. So anyway, let's just start off quickly about what is auditing, right? So why would you want to audit? Things of that nature. So a lot of people, when they hear auditing, they think, ugh, and they cringe and they think they're going to get in trouble for doing something wrong, right? Like in America, we have the Internal Revenue Service. So when you think you're going to get audited, it's this, ugh, right? Or you have internal and external auditors. External auditors, I know, can be particularly scary. They're coming in asking, but I think auditing is a good thing. If you want to make sure that people are following proper procedure, and if you don't have proper procedures, then auditing helps you figure out what you might want a procedure to look like. So why you want to audit? Well, I think you should audit regardless, but maybe your company doesn't think it's important to audit. Maybe your company is required to audit, but you're not sure how to go about it. Even if you're not required, it shouldn't stop you from auditing. I set it up because I got tired of people saying, oh, this is broken, it's the database, it's always blaming the database. And actually it's a good thing that I prioritized the setup of auditing because my company was acquired by a more heavily regulated company and they want auditing reports on a weekly basis. So it was nice that was all in place. So you're basically in the dark without auditing. Auditing can help you see who changed something, maybe that changes what broke something, maybe a user was set up for one purpose and it got shared around, everybody's using it. That actually happened where I worked with SA on SQL Server in particular, and people didn't even know the power they had. A lot of people were using SA, and they don't necessarily know how they're using it either. So with the cloud stuff, at least, we've been way more careful about perms that are being handed out. So we don't really have as many problems like that. It's not such a big deal in Azure for us, but it could be for you. I mean, you could see, oh, somebody shared around an app user, something like that. Maybe you want to know that kind of stuff. So it helps for you to go back to them and say, hey, I see how you're using this, so I can help you get off of that and get you the perms that you need with a different user. So just really quickly, the cloud SQL auditing options, right? So Azure SQL Managed Instance and AWS RDS, right? You can do the same audit. So if you're already familiar with SQL Server Auditing, for instance, like extended events or the SQL Server Audit itself, those are going to work the same. The only difference is going to be that you have to use cloud storage. Now, I forgot to even mention VM, because VM in the cloud is just like as if you're on your own on-prem data center, right? So that's the same thing. The difference with SQL Managed Instance and RDS is that you've got to use the cloud storage, like so a blob or S3 or whatever for the cloud. And then Azure SQL is different. It does not have SQL Server Audit. Like you can't go in the GUI and right click and create an audit, right? You can create an extended event in there, but mainly how I use the audit with Azure SQL is I go in through the portal, and you have a SQL Server Audit quasi equivalent. And it works similarly, but it's enough different that this is what I'm going to walk through with you today, because it's different enough that you'll need some guidance. Well, I needed this guidance when I started, so I gathered it all for you to show you here. So like I said, I think a lot of people go use Azure SQL. I used to say move from SQL Server. I don't even do that. I don't recommend moving your on-prem workload, the SQL Server, to Azure SQL. There's too many differences. But a lot of times we set up when an app or some process needs a new database, we are setting them up in Azure SQL or in AWS RDS, right? So we're not creating them generally in SQL Server anymore or in a VM in the cloud, that kind of stuff. So like I said, the auditing is built into the portal. So you go in there and you start clicking buttons. I'm sure you could do it at the CLI or, some Azure PowerShell or whatever. But maybe for automating purposes, I have not done that yet. I've been doing a lot of clicking. So you can enable it for free or at a cost, depending on your storage location. And the server audit applies to all the databases. So if you turn to the server level, there's no option to say, don't do this database, all this stuff. Like SQL Server Audit on SQL Server itself is a lot more nuanced in that way. But here it's by default, it's not quite as nuanced. And so then you can turn on database level. Say you only want to audit one database on the server, which is sort of confusing. In Azure world, there still is a server, and then you have all your databases on it, right? Even though you don't have access to the server. But you wouldn't want to do that. You don't want to enable it to database and the server level, because now you're just getting a lot of duplicate data. You don't want that. And so you can't filter on these either. So if you're familiar with SQL Server Audit, where you could go to put a where clause in there, basically saying, I don't want to see this user, I want to see that user, and all this different stuff, you can't really do that here. So you're getting everything. And actually, I tested it even in basic, it's available. So it's available in all the pricing tiers. And so that was kind of cool. So when you use the default, I mentioned the default auditing in Azure SQL, you're going to get all the queries and stored products along with all the logins successful and failed. So basically everything that's happening is kind of a fire hose of information, especially if your system is relatively busy, like most production servers probably are, right? So if you're familiar with SQL Server Audit, I keep saying, because there are similarities here, these kind of actions may seem familiar to you. These may not be exactly the same as in SQL Server. There are differences in the names, and ones that are available, the actions available in Azure SQL are different in some cases than what's in SQL Server, and there is some overlap as well. I didn't put them on a slide for you because it would be a very busy slide, but just know there's some differences there. So like I said, this is getting everything, right? So that's, like I said, sort of like a fire hose. So I'm going to show you here how you can actually change that. So it's not going to get this fire hose of information. And so that's by setting and getting the policy with PowerShell, right? So I was just using the CLI for this. So this is an example script, what I used for my server, right? My server is JB Auditing. It's in a resource group name. Just note that server name, you don't put the database.windows.net on there because it fails with that. You used to put the name, that's just the name. So here we can see what is set. You see the successful database authentication group, those 3 actions that are by default. So there is a link on there's a resources slide at the end of this too, that'll cover a lot of these topics in more detail. So there's more information on that slide about this. So this just shows you what's there now, right? And that would be too much for me in any given situation. I don't want to know everybody selecting everything. I mean, at least I don't think I do. I want to see the things that change. So what I'm going to do is modify it, right? So there's that way of setting it. And so once I know so these are the accepted values. I was going to say what I know what I want to do, right? These are what you can set it to. You can set it to multiple of these, right? So you could choose all of them or one of them, whatever you want to do there. But what I want to do is something similar to what I do in SQL Server, which is just get when people change passwords or some change object, like create a table or I don't know, drop a table or some kind of things, actions inside changes, things like that. I don't want to see select, insert, update, delete, kind of things like that. So that's what this thing is going to do here. It's going to set it. And then at the bottom of the slide here, that was the get, just so that you can see now, you can see the audit action group has changed. So that's going to help you really filter down. Now, I can understand why you might not want to change the default policy right away. Maybe you want to just see what all filters through to see what you want to see or not see. There's going to be a lot of stuff like view server state stuff that, you know, if you haven't used SQL Server Audit or extended events very much, you're going to see all kinds of stuff that SQL Server does in the background, that things that happen when somebody does a select or other statements, that SQL Server is doing all kinds of things back there that you didn't know. So you may or may not want to change this at first so you can get a feel for what all does come through. But once you have an official auditing policy, for me, what I want to say, like I've mentioned, so I want to see if somebody changes some kind of permissions. I want to see if they change some objects they're creating or dropping objects and things like that. Those are red flags to me. So that's what this would do here, this changing my auditing policy. So that is not required though. You don't have to do that. So if you're not comfortable with that, or you want to get everything, and you know, the nice thing about it is that it's not like it's going to overload your database if you're auditing everything anyway. I mean, Azure's handling that behind the scenes. It's just going to put it all in the whatever storage you choose, which we're going to go over now. So you don't have to worry it's going to overload everything or anything either. So you can feel safe not changing that if you don't feel comfortable. So here's how you turn it on at the server level, right? So you just click a button, it's just a radio button, enable it. And then you get a few options where you can store it. Also, you can audit Microsoft support operations. I recommend, they're doing things back there, you can get it in there. You can put it in a different location if you don't want to have it, which I personally would do because I don't want it mixed in with the auditing report that I want to provide to the auditors with changes on our actual database systems. So, but it's nice to know what Microsoft's doing in the background there. So that's an option for you there. So there are three choices for your storage. So you have storage, which is like a blob. So it puts an XEL file, and we'll look at that in secs. So like extended event, like an XEL file goes into storage for you. And then log analytics, which personally is my favorite because it's easy to centralize and report on and get, you know, it has CUSTO query language, but the CUSTO stuff, you know, it's pretty easy. If you know SQL, yeah, you're going to be able to figure out CUSTO. So then Event Hub is another option for you there. So quickly running through the storage. So you check the box, you pick a storage, you set a retention. You know, I just expanded that stuff for you. 0 is forever, and you set a storage key. It's pretty straightforward, right? Or you don't have to do the advanced stuff. I just want to open it there for you to see. You could just put subscription storage account, boom, click save, and this is where it'll write to your blob. It's going to put in these subfolders, which I personally didn't really like, is the subfolders and stuff, and this database and this audit and this day and all the files, and you got to parse through there. I'm sure you could parse through PowerShell or something, and then centralize it. But I don't use this because I personally think it's so much easier to put it in the log analytics. It's easy to query. I can put all my databases in the same one. Well, let's just say that I pretty much do it by regions, though. I wouldn't necessarily put like West Coast stuff on the East Coast stuff. Maybe I don't know if I combine it all. That's what I've been doing, is kind of keeping it by region, but it's not essential. So we have some across different regions. So then it's more of a reporting issue when I want to have the whole report together. But that's kind of up to you where you want to put it all. I like to put it together. Then it's centralized very easily. So there is a free option with log analytics if you want to try it out. It's not very expensive anyway, but if you were concerned about that, you can get 500 megs a day for up to 7 days of history. Last I checked, I'm not sure if that's still the case or not, but like I said, it's not very expensive. I mean, if you already have a database and other stuff set up, you're probably not really worried about log analytics costs. So then you just pick your subscription, pick your log analytics workspace, and then when you want to view the data. So you've turned it on at the server level, right? But you need to go into each database. If you want to view it from the database side, you're going to have to go into each database, and you're going to click auditing, and then you're going to click view logs, and then another click log analytics. It does not. So that's one thing to note, is that audit records page, I've never seen anything on this page, but I've always used log analytics. There may be another way that actual events go into that number 2 screenshot there listing, but I always go into log analytics, and this is where it comes up with a query for you to run to see what's happening in your audit, right? So like I mentioned, it may be a little confusing. You turn on the server level, you can go into each database to view it. You can't view the auditing data from the server level itself. So, but you don't want them on, you don't want to turn it on in both locations, right? So you just want to make sure you don't have duplicates. You're going to get two of everything in here if you have it on a server level and database level. So one thing to note, I've noticed with the log analytics. So I already have it set up in advance for the demo because I didn't want you to have to sit waiting while we're just waiting and waiting for something to load. So I've seen it where when you originally set up the auditing, then you need to wait a little. Sometimes you get an error saying there's some random error, or you get nothing, even though you know something's happened. So, I think with the log analytics, when you first set up auditing, you need to be patient. I've turned it off sometimes at the server level, turned it back on, and then sometimes it just takes a little bit of patience for it to start. When you're first setting it up, I've noticed that. Not every time though. So just so you know that could happen. So the other option for you is I had to click on every database because like I mentioned, I want it to be easy to centralize. I want to go to one place. I'm going to go clicking on 20 different databases, right? So you can actually go into the Log Analytics workspace and view the workspace summary. And you can actually go into the logs. There's a logs button toward the top there in the little menu. And then, or you can see this audit distribution by database, by IP, different things here that you can then drill into. If you just want a quick look-see, you don't have to send a report to an auditor. You just want to come in here and click and start querying it. You can just do that from the Log Analytics workspace directly. And then so that's the dashboard, right? So, a summary. But if you want to say, I'm going to go in there and actually see it's in a table, I want to see my results, right? This is when you can go into that same Log Analytics workspace, but instead you can click on logs instead of workspace summary, right? So then logs is going to bring you to a place where you can custom create a query. Now, mind you, something like this query on this slide here, if you go in from the Azure SQL Database side, it will pre-populate a query like this query for you. So if you're not comfortable with Kusto, I would say don't go into your Log Analytics workspace to get your audit data. I always say go through the database because then it puts you in there with the query already. But since I've provided this nice query for you, you could use this and just plop it in there. The one thing is I mentioned this filter because sometimes I've noticed when I change, like I mentioned, changing the default auditing, sometimes it comes up with this NT authority system. Oh, mind the two backslashes on purpose because you have to escape that backslash in Kusto, otherwise you get an error. So just so you know, you might need to filter more depending on what you're seeing, what you really want to see in your report, or your query, the results based on what you're actually getting back, because it might be different than what I'm getting back too. So here's what it looks like when you drop that query into Log Analytics, right? So one thing to note is, and I'll kind of show you in the demo, there's this arrow here, and when it first comes up, when Log Analytics first comes up, there's going to be a little window that comes. There's going to be a little window that pops up and says, "Hi, do you want to use any of these templates?" The auditing stuff in there. There might be an auditing category, but none of that stuff works for this. First of all, I just close that. But the thing is, there will be a history down here when you first load. It'll show you all queries you've run in the past. You can click it again, or you can actually save this as a save query and put in your favorites. So that way you can always have it to come back here. So we'll see that in a little bit. So that's my favorite. So that was an expanded topic on that. But so you have Event Hub. I set this up only so you could see it. I think, honestly, I feel like this is the most terrifying option of them all to me because I don't know how to use it really. So it winds up storing them in Event Hub in a stream you can consume and write them to a target in JSON, and then now everything's just lost me. So maybe if you already have Event Hub set up for other things, and it's maybe a good way for you to pull in data. I personally thought, nope. Anyway, but it's there for you. So in case. So here's just a screenshot of enabling at database level. So you can see server level auditing is enabled. It is in green there saying, yeah, it's enabled, which should be it's a green flag, but I was going to say a red flag to you saying don't enable it at this database. We're at the SQL database level. Don't enable it here, because it's already there. So personally, I just do it at server level. Is it going to get I don't know if there's a database in prod that I don't want to audit. I mean, I don't actually have a use case for that. Maybe you have a bunch of databases on the server you don't really care about. Then you would definitely want to make sure this says disabled before enabling at the database level, right? So you don't get all that duplicate data. So I'm going to do a demo now. I'm also going to take a sec to see if anybody had any questions. Let me see. I think I see something in the chat. Oh, ARM templates. Probably. I've never done it, but I'm guessing you probably could and put the auditing set up in ARM templates. I'm guessing you probably could do it in some kind of Terraform and all that other stuff too, right? Like or some infrastructure automation. Does it audit service? Does it a part of Azure log? And I'm not sure I understand that question. Does it audit service a part of? Well, I mean, you can store the audit stuff in log analytics. So in that sense, it is part of it, but it doesn't like automatically send anything to log analytics. So I'm not sure if that answers that question. So I'm going to just wait for a sec. Somebody's typing. Let's see if there's another question before I start my demo. Then I can have a drink. Here we go. See if I can remember everything that I want to show you in my demo while waiting to type. While I'm waiting, somebody's typing. So I'll check back over there in a sec. So okay, so if log analytics and view log analytics and view dashboard option is showing disabled, then it must be a permission issue. It may be a permission issue. I'm not sure. I'm not sure because I have full perms to my environment. I'd have to look into that because I'm not really sure. Let me write that down. That's a good question. Okay. But you can access the rest of the log analytics workspace. It's just the dashboard. Well, let me know if you can see anything else, and I'll figure out if there's like a permission that you need. It is a good question. It may be developed in your environments. I'm not sure what permissions. That's another good question. Like, what permissions do you need in order to set up the audit? This is why I love presenting, because people ask me things I don't know the answer to. So I'm not sure what permissions. I'm thinking if you have permissions to set up a database, you probably have permissions to set up an audit. But then again, if you have to create storage or something else, you might not have those perms. So let you all type over there for a sec. I'll start my demo so we keep this ball rolling here. So right now that we're at the database level. Who knows how I wound up there yesterday at some point in a fog. I left it on that page. So here we're at the server level. And this is where you'll want to set up your auditing, which I did already just because for time, due to time constraints. I don't want everybody sitting around waiting while I save things and waiting for things to load, things like that. So I have set this to log analytics. Like I said, it's my favorite destination. And then, so you have, like I said, you have your storage, so that's Blob and Event Hub. And then I am not currently auditing Microsoft Support Operations, but I would in prod, and because this is my little test environment. And then I probably would put it in a different location than storing it all together. Just like I said, I want it mushed all in there when I'm trying to pull reports for auditors and query things. I'll see if somebody did something in our own company, right? Somebody changed something in our own database. So once this is saved, and this actually doesn't take that long to save. So then, like I said, even though you enabled it here, you would need to go into your database to actually see the auditing stuff. So, oh, you see, and it's in basic. I said it and I thought, wait, did I really test it? And it is in basic, and it does work in basic. I was kind of surprised all the auditing worked there, and there are no restrictions. So then you come down to auditing. And this is where you see it's enabled at the server level. So I said, yeah, okay, red flag or a green flag, say don't enable it here too, because I don't want to get two of everything in my audit records, right? So I'm going to view audit logs, right? So here's what I mentioned, how I never see stuff here. I've never seen stuff here. It could be the nature of this. Oh, so maybe this is what you mean, view dashboard. This never works from here. If this is what you were asking in the chat, view dashboard, this never works for me either. I have no idea why that never works, but it does not. And that's a good question. So let me see. Let me see about that. I just worked around it. So let me write that down. So I just go into log analytics so I can see the stuff. And then see, this is where it pre-populates a query for you in case you're not comfortable using Kusto or you don't feel like going to my slide to get a query for yourself or whatever. So it already populates this for you. And this is in the case of my query I had. I take this out because I tend to put, so this, what I just did was, this is a certain subscription, a certain database, everything. I just want everything from this log analytics. I don't actually share across subscriptions, but I just like to take it all out. I want to see all of the security events across all of my data. I put all my databases in the same one here. So then I say run, right? So this is what you can see that I've done. And this is what I mentioned here, anti-authority system, right? This only happened after I changed the default auditing stuff. So I'm not sure if the nature of the change, it was changing, that's what it logged, it was I changed the audit actions, or if there's some stuff going on in the background that it sort of gets internally. So just so you know, you might see some of that kind of stuff in there, and it's, I don't think it's anything alarming or anything. These are the actual things that I did yesterday that I changed, that actually, so you can see something come through the audit. Now, mind you, before that, this down here, this was before I changed the audit policy. And it was getting everything. So like this, no exit, this, all this stuff. You would get a lot of other stuff here. Like all of these kinds of select schema and all this stuff is happening in the background as part of me querying a table or logging in and stuff. So this is what the default auditing policy would get you, all kinds of stuff, you know, so many things. And so I guess really quickly I can show you, since I did this yesterday and it's in my history, so it's easy to show you. So I'll just go in here and get the policy for you. So you saw there was a slide I had, and like I said, this is not required. You don't have to get your policy. You don't have to change your policy, but just know you're going to get a ton of information in your audit results, and it's going to be a lot of more rows that you may or may not want all that. Of course, you can always filter in your Kusto query, all the stuff you don't want to see potentially. And so it's kind of up to you. I don't want it all in there. I want to only see if people change things. I don't want to see if they select and change. When I mean change things, I mean permissions or schema or stuff like that. I don't want to see somebody inserted to a table maybe. That's what I mean when I say that. So now you can see that actually the audit action group has that list of stuff that I want to see. I don't want to see everything in the kitchen sink, right? I just want to see these changes, right? And so in order to do that, this here is what I ran. Well, it's sort of a cross section of what I ran, but because it was multi-line and history doesn't do very well with that, but it's in the slide. So in case you want to see what I actually do, oh wait, that's not what I do. Wait, hold on. So this is, sorry, that this here would set it back to the default because I did do that, and that is the default. So don't disregard that unless you want to set it back to the default after you've changed it. But see, this here is what I was looping through. Oh, and I forgot it's not caret, it's supposed to be that. So I was testing. So then you would set it and list all those actions, right? So anyway, not required. Don't feel like, oh, you have to do that. But so really quickly, since we're in here, let's go over to, okay, yeah, discard, because that's just a query. If you wanted to save that, I'll show you in a sec. So you can actually go through your log. And so I showed you how you get to the auditing from the database side, and it pre-populates a Kusto query for you. But now that after this, you'll be fancy. You don't need that, right? You can come over here, and this is how you can actually get to the summary from the log analytics log analytics workspace side, right? So you can get this information. Security insights is the thing in question here. And this gives you that dashboard, the dashboard that you can't get from the database side, that I can't even get either. And I know I have full perms here, that now this gives you that nice dashboard that I mentioned, you know, where you could go, oh, I want to see, okay, I just want to see this database, and it'll like kind of drill it, and then it'll give you a query and it'll just show you that. Now, I don't really use this, quite frankly. It's there if you want a quick look-see or whatever, then sure. But mainly what I do is, so you say, okay, and because they're all going to warn you, even though it populated the query for you, it's going to warn you, did you change? I didn't even change anything. But so what I use is this logs here. So logs just puts me in, this is this window I mentioned to you. It comes up, and there is an audit category, but honestly, there's like, I don't know, it's auditing everything across Azure, different stuff. This, I'd say close that. You can always tell it to not show you this again too if it's not your thing, but I just close that. And then I use some history, but you can also say, I want to put, so let's run a query. Let's actually run a query we can save. So I could say save this. I could save it as a query, and then it would be over here. So let's just do that really quickly. I don't know, audit. So you would have it here for all eternity, right? Well, I mean, that's a long time, but you know what I mean? It's there for you. And then if I could find it, oh, I shouldn't demo stuff that I'm not sure I could find it for you. Anyway, it's in there. And then you should favorite it so you don't lose it like I just did. So at any rate, I did this stuff for you yesterday just so you could see something. But here's an example. Like if you had the default auditing policy on, now I'm just connected to it in Azure Data Studio, right? I would run this. Then I would actually see that come up over here after a little bit, and not necessarily right away too. Even when, like I mentioned about when you first create the LOG ANALYTICS workspace, you might have to wait a little, you might get an error, you might not get anything for a bit. Then you probably shouldn't be alarmed. Sometimes the audit is not like instantaneously in there either. Like, oh, they selected something and like 2 seconds later it's in the audit. So, you know, sometimes you got to wait a little. But this will not be in there because I did change the default auditing policy with PowerShell, right? At the CLI, I did the set, and so I won't be getting selects because I changed that. Whereas here, I'm going to create yet another random table. And so now you can see I've got this third table in here, and then this will show up in here eventually, or hopefully. I say that because it'll break when I'm running a demo, of course. So while we wait, what should we talk about? Because I was hoping this would be faster. Well, at any rate, I'm going to show you in a sec. Let me see. I'm going to show you in a sec about the whole idea behind logic apps. That's how I actually report on this stuff. And I have slides on this, but while we wait, since that's taking a while, so it's like really real. I don't have a logic app set up in here in this subscription, but I'm going to take you through some screenshots. So basically to report on this auditing data, what I use is this logic app. So you just create an app. It's very easy. Actually, I thought it was very easy. So as I say, audit report, right? And because it's got to be unique across everything. I don't know. I don't know. I put everything in ECOS too because my whole company is in the East Coast. Anyway, so I say this, I create a logic app, right? And then I'll put the steps in there, which I'm going to show you on a slide because I'm going to go through this whole logic app with you. But it's pretty cool. And it's just emailing. So I will warn you, though, if you set up a logic app to email and you have the default auditing policy on and you decide, ooh, a Kusto query that sends everything that's gigantic, well, it's going to fail because it's not going to be able to send an email that's, you know, got so many rows in it. Let's go back to our workspace and see what's happened. If it doesn't come in here, it still doesn't mean that it didn't work. That was a lot of negatives in one sentence. Okay, so look, it's there, and it's in there twice, which I can't really explain why. I'll have to look into that because it shouldn't be in there twice. For all of my knowledge on this, is that, yeah. I've got to look into that, but it's there. So I'm very excited about that, that it did work. See, there's that delay. So, and I got a little alarmed, didn't I? Even though I told you not to get alarmed. So that's that. Let me see, is there some more questions here? So a difference between elastic pool versus not. That's a good question. I'm not sure about auditing in elastic pool. I haven't audited an elastic pool, but I'm not sure there would be much difference. I'll have to set one up. Actually, I think I might have one at the office. I'll test it out. I'll test it out and see. I can get back to y'all. So the query that I have here is it's mostly like, actually this one is the default query, I think. I just took this, but the one on my slide has some more stuff in here. Like I moved some of these columns around mainly. The default one is very close to the one that I am using. So I just, here it's got, you can set the range here, or you can set the range in the query itself. So on my slide, it's just a little bit different, but it's very close. I think this one looks like the default one, because they always say take 100. That's a big sign that it's probably the default one, is they always have this take 100 at the bottom. So it's not returning 50 billion rows. It's, you know, it's only going to return that 100. I just take that out because I don't use a default auditing policy either, right? I don't want it to limit to 100 because I know it's not going to be that much. But they probably assume that you have the default auditing policy, which is going to be everything under the sun, right? And or you know, you might be doing, you can do a lot of stuff with log analytics, not just this data, audit data stuff from a database. You can do tons. So it's probably why they say take 100, because that gives you a good idea. So let's hop back over to the slides here, and we will see some screenshots. Actually, first, I mentioned this here, the centralizing the audit data, just so that you know, when I said before, storing that one database in log analytics, it's all in the same place, right? Because I put them all in the same workspace. So just so you know, this is like basically exactly the same screenshot than several slides ago, but it says that centralizing is literally storing them in the same log analytics workspace. So that is what that means. Now, here's the logic app I mentioned. So I haven't perfected this yet, to be honest, but I use this to send an email. So on SQL Server side, there's a much more perfected process, I have to admit. I've been doing it longer. And so I have a daily email that sends. So it's like any red flags are caught before a weekly ticket is sent to, we have Jira. So I do that with PowerShell, and I send the daily email with a SQL agent job. I have a whole nother presentation on that stuff. But just so you know, this is my plan for the daily email, at least, which is a basic workflow. Like I said, you probably don't want to use this unless you've set the server policy differently than the default. Like all that stuff, you probably don't want to email that. Probably would just fail because it's going to be so much you won't be able to put in a CSV and email it. So here is where I just say every day at 10. By the way, this is UTC, so that you know, because I got an email and I'm 6 hours behind that, so it came at 4 in the morning. It's like, why did this email come at 4? Because I set it for 10, but this is UTC time, just so you know. And so that's a simple step, recurrence step. And then basically we just drop the Kusto query in here. So I want to do, it says time range last 24 hours, but I also noted it in the query, it's the last day. So, you know, either way you could do it like that. But so this is that query that was in my slide, the one that is sort of custom, you know, it's sort of a variation of the default Kusto query. So it'll pull that data for me. Then I'm putting a CSV, because quite frankly, formatting it to put it in the body of an email is like, forget it. There is no point anyway, because I've done that with SQL Server. I've formatted HTML into the body of an email with SQL Agent, and full statements blow out the email. I have to put partial statements in that email. So honestly, it's just easier if you put in a CSV in here. And then I send that CSV as an attachment in email. That's why I keep mentioning If you have so much data, you haven't filtered it out to send, it's never going to send, right? Because I don't even want to see a report of everything under the sun that everybody did for last day. On a production system, I mean, that could be tons of rows, right? But again, you can change your auditing policy so you're just getting that stuff you want to see, whatever that is you want to see. That's kind of up to you. And so this works very nicely. Actually, I really like this. It was nice. And I can do all of it from my Mac. So I like that too. I mean, funny enough, I didn't know that I would ever say that, but I do actually love not having to remote into Windows to do all this stuff. So here's just a few more things for you at the end. I wanted to mention there are other ways you can audit, right? So if you're comfortable auditing, I don't know if I've ever met anybody that said they were really comfortable auditing with extended events in SQL Server, but I do it a lot, and I'm not even sure I'm comfortable with it, but you can do that in Azure SQL as well. So in this case, you can go in there and literally use the GUI, which is kind of nice because a lot of stuff in Azure SQL, you right click to create a login or a user or whatever, it puts a script in the window for you. This actually takes you through the wizard and brings up a dialog box just like as if you're in a VM. It's actually really nice. But I also included a script here for you. So this is basically going to get everything Josephine does. That Josephine, I don't know what she's doing. Yeah, just got to keep an eye on her. So let me see what all she's doing in there. And then this is where you need that storage account. You already have to have a storage account set up, and you're going to have to write to it. I'm going to say that you might need to have a credential for this, and I didn't add that, but so I might need to add that. You might need to have a credential set up on SQL Server to access that storage account. Just as a warning, you might need that. I might have done that, and I might have forgotten to tell you in the slide. So let me look at that, and I'll add that later if need be. But anyway, it's nice. This is nice because you know how I mentioned if you set up auditing and you click that nice radio button in the portal, and it puts it in a storage account for you, but yet it puts it in like by database, by date, and then in all these little all these subfolders, and then you have to parse, you have to go parsing through all these folders to get it. This way, you can just drop these things in there in one folder. Now, I wouldn't call it audit.xel, because I would need to name it specific to each database so that when I put it in there, it's not getting confused or failing or trying to overwrite some other database's XEL file. But I could legitimately see it as a good way to audit is to, do this. There are limitations with extended events that I don't actually like it for its true auditing functionality, like say how I'm using auditing in Azure, how I use it in SQL Server with getting schema and perms changes of that kind of stuff. Extended events doesn't do as well, but I think it's great if you want to say, oh, geez, I think this user got shared around. Who's using it all? What is happening with this user? Like I did with SA, I used extended events on SQL Server, actually. I did not use SQL Server Audit. So I wanted to get everything SA was doing, and extended events is very lightweight. Audit is too, but there's a long story of a horror story I have with SQL Server Audit where I crashed the server, but that should never happen. In fact, I've done that similar scenario again to this day. I have never been able to crash a production server. Not that I want to, but that was like a real fluke one-off. But I mention it just so you know, like that's the reason you don't want to just audit everything, because you can't. It's not likely you're going to crash the server. These things are lightweight. And in Azure especially, it's very seamless. I mean, they collect tons of data with that default audit. I've never seen any issue on a busy production server, but it's just that how are you going to go through all this audit data? Is like a needle in a haystack. You might as well not audit anything if you're just going to audit everything. So that's my take on it, and that's why I recommend changing that default audit strategy or crafting your own with extended events, depending on what you need to see, right? Just so that you get what you need instead of like drinking from a fire hose. So finally, the last thing of this is managed instance auditing, right? And this actually is very similar to AWS RDS, in case you're wondering. It's this, it's the whole shebang, right? You got the whole menu, you got the SQL Server Audit, extended events. The main thing is you need the blob storage for all this stuff. So anything, pretty much anything, I was going to say anything. I can't guarantee anything you can do in SQL Server, you can do a managed instance, because I know there are some Small exceptions to functionality. I'm not sure they're in audit or send events though. I think this stuff is pretty much the same, but blob storage, right? Because you don't have access to the disks underneath it, right? You don't have access to that VM. So in case you're using this, I haven't met anybody that's using Managed Instance in production yet though, but it's there for you in case you need it. So here's the resources slide. A lot of different stuff here for you that, different things that I've covered here, that it goes into more detail if you want more detail. I think for the most part, and if anybody finds this is wrong, definitely hit me up. I think if you follow what I did here, you're pretty solid. You might not need these links, but they help you to have a better understanding. So thank you for coming here. And like I said, contact me. If you find something wrong, you find something right, you have questions, you want to have a dialogue, whatever, contact me. I'm on Twitter at Hello SQL Kitty. And my blog has all information. It has a bunch of videos on other stuff. I'm going to add more of this information that I did for you today. But there's a lot of stuff on auditing in general and other presentations I've got. So there's links to all that. In case you're interested, you probably still have SQL Server like I do. I still have a lot of SQL Server stuff. So I still need all that other auditing stuff. So that's everything. Look at that. I finished early today. I could have talked longer, but I didn't. And I think that's better. So yeah, you could contact me here. You can even email me. That's fine. Here's my email. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Josephine Branchbush. I'll put that on in there. So you can hit me on LinkedIn too. But yeah, feel free. I say this, and every time I say it, it feels like, why am I saying? But I kind of love auditing. I never thought I would say that, and I said it again. So yeah, but it's kind of a passion. I'm not sure after I do all of my auditing topics, what will I talk about? Who knows? I'll have to think of something else, I guess. But I kind of love auditing. Go figure. I was once audited. Speaking of my the audit at the beginning, I mentioned the IRS. I once got audited by the IRS, and they called me, or they sent me a letter, I think, as I recall, and I called them. And I guess I felt very anxious to the person on the other end of the phone. And she's like, hold on. We think we owe you money. So I was like, oh my God, this is the best auditing experience ever. Maybe that's what turned my mind onto auditing. This was years ago, but it was always in the back of my mind that, well, they did owe me money, it turns out. So it all worked out. See, it's a happy auditing story. Good things can happen with an audit. And I have found that really, generally speaking, less people come to me now with, oh my God, the database broke this thing, because they have found that I say to them, well, I can see nothing change. And I think they actually just don't think the database broke it. And I don't know why, because it could still be the database.